Only a weak person avoids challenge. This is why ultimately a lot of women end up resenting men. That feeling of built up resentment that you get towards a man, you're actually resentful at his learned helplessness. It's important to not end up with a man who avoids challenge at all costs, because he is almost always going to lack emotional maturity, the ability to learn from his mistakes, and the ability to take responsibility for his actions. When you come across someone who tends to avoid growth and responsibility, you have to understand that their brain is wired differently because of that. That's the part that's called learned helplessness. And for a lot of men, their learned helplessness is a response to failure. And I would even go further and say it's a response to perceived failure. A lot of men don't feel like they're living up to the standard of success or attractiveness or competence. They perceive this as uncontrollable bad events. They're like, money is not falling out of the sky. I'm not just automatically, ripped and 6'4". But at the end of the day, the entire idea is that because of this perceived lack of control over their circumstances, their behavior shifts into generalized helpless behavior. A lot of these people are high on the avoidance scale, just in general, and as far as attachment. And all of this is behind a lot of the men's behavior that we have recently as a society, but especially in women's communities, have started to notice it as a pattern, and we've started to talk about it a lot more. Behaviors like, weaponized incompetence, offloading emotional, physical, and mental labor onto everyone around them. So why does this occur more in men than it does in women? Because we live in a patriarchy. Because we prioritize men over women in our society, we tend to give men a lot of leeway and excuses and all sorts of easy ramps in exchange for nothing. Women are really told to suck it up at a very young age. As girls, it even starts with things like, having to wear uncomfortable dresses, or having your parents force you into gender roles and being told to sit there and smile. It's being told that, boys will be boys and boys hurt you because they like you, and you shouldn't be mean to boys, but if they're mean to you, then that means they like you. And you start getting your period, and everyone acts like it's no big deal. Like a man wouldn't be in the ER if that just started freaking happening to him every month. Are you kidding me? Don't even get me started on pregnancy and childbirth and how you're supposed to act and look beautiful and glowing and pretty through all of that. And that everyone acts like it's normal for women to carry the emotional, mental, and physical load around the house, even though most men and women work the same amount of hours now. But all this kind of stuff and sort of being told to suck it up anyway actually does teach women a lot of really valuable things. It teaches you about your own strength, about your own endurance. It teaches you, not to doubt yourself. It teaches you that you can do hard things. It teaches you nothing is really impossible. If you can deal with that kind of stuff, every month, or if you can birth a baby, nothing is impossible. And men don't have that. It's at the end of the day, you kind of almost feel bad for them. You start to understand that if the patriarchy wasn't so horrible to women, what would men even do? And the thing that women do with the pain instead is they alchemize it. They alchemize it into love, into strength, into endurance, into understanding, into empathy, into compassion. The fact that women have to work, twice as hard still backfires on the men. It still backfires on the men because women have more skills. They're more resilient. They're more enduring. They survive better on their own than men do. Women live longer on their own than men do on their own. And men live longer when they're with women versus women who live with men. Those women actually lose several years off their life because men on their own suffer from what? Learned helplessness. They suffer from being on the path of least resistance. They suffer from the inability to alchemize painful experiences, to face them, to be aware of them. And that's why a lot of times women walk away from a relationship and they have a glow up in every way, physical, mental, emotional. And what's a man doing a lot of times immediately after a breakup? Looking for another woman because they lack the capacity to function well on their own. Even if you want to get biblical and religious with it, even God said that. He said it's not good for a man to be alone. That's less reason for you to become a helpmeet or a helper to a man. That's just more reason for you to avoid them. Because if they're not good alone on their own, then my question is, how can they be better off with another person? That's the logical fallacy that we're all making. We're thinking that someone who's not good on their own deserves even someone who is. You have to learn how to be on your own so that then you can have a healthy and productive relationship in which someone is not sacrificing years of their life to make your life last longer. Because that's what happens. It is not good for a man to be alone, and that should be all the more reason for him to learn how to do that. Again, all the more reason for you as a woman to avoid him. Because anyone who's not good on their own is going to bring that same kind of toxic, helpless, path of least resistance behavior into your relationship. They will refuse to engage with you emotionally. They will refuse to share the mental load. They will think that not knowing how to do something is a great excuse to just never do it. Instead of, being proactive and learning how to do it, they will just avoid it. They will just avoid the task and wait for somebody else to come along and just start doing it for them. I promise you, as a woman, your time on earth is a lot more valuable than that. And it is a lot better spent doing things for yourself and furthering your own success, career, goals, what have you. Self-awareness is painful. Growth is painful. And you have to do it anyway. You have to go into it and do it anyway, because that's the only way forward. But you do have to realize that some people are just like allergic to that. They're avoidant to that. And they will avoid it at any cost. And that's why they stay the same age mentally. They stopped being inconvenienced. They stopped having to grow. They stopped having to learn from their mistakes. It's not really a chemical reaction. You know, nothing chemical happens in your brain. What changes is the circumstances around you. And what you become is actually entitled, which, yes, leads to complete immaturity, leads to a lack of growth, leads to a lack of self-awareness, and a lack of progress ultimately. It's really nothing chemical that's changed. It's your perception of your own circumstances. And whether someone is avoiding growth via learned helplessness or entitlement, either way, that's not somebody you want to be with. Either way, you're better off on your own. This is actually part 1 of a little mini series I'm going to do on this. So we'll go to part 2 for signs of a man who has adopted learned helplessness as his primary mode of thinking and functioning. See you there. I love you.